All right, I want you to picture something. It's the North Atlantic, the night of July 25th, 1956. And there's this thick, heavy fog just blanketing the sea. The kind of fog that swallows every sound, every sight. It is incredibly eerie, just quiet. But for two massive ocean liners out there in the dark, this night is about to become one of the most infamous maritime disasters in modern history.
And right away, that's the question that just hangs over this whole story, isn't it? I mean, this is a huge open ocean. And this wasn't the age of sail. Both of these ships had radar, this amazing technology that was supposed to make this exact kind of disaster impossible. So how? How did they end up on a collision course? Well, that's what we're going to figure out.
So the stage for this whole thing is set right here, just off the coast of Nantucket. Now, you have to understand, these are some of the busiest shipping lanes in the entire world. It's like a floating highway. And this area is absolutely notorious for this thick, disorienting fog, where visibility can just drop to nothing in a heartbeat. Okay, so to really get what went wrong, we need to meet the two main players in this drama. You've got two very different ships sharing the same tiny patch of that fog-bound ocean. First up, we have the magnificent SS Andrea Doria. And listen, this was way more than just a ship. She was a symbol of pride for post-war Italy, a floating art gallery just filled with luxuries. And on this particular night, she was carrying 1,706 souls, passengers and crew, just hours away from seeing the New York skyline. The voyage was almost over. And steaming in the exact opposite direction was the MS Stockholm, a different kind of ship entirely. She was smaller, more of a workhorse, a passenger cargo ship from the Swedish American line. But she was tough. Her bow was reinforced for smashing through ice in the North Atlantic. So you've got the grand dame of the sea, the Andrea Doria, and this rugged, powerful Stockholm. So there you have it. Two ships, miles apart, in a thick fog, both watching each other on their radar screens. I mean, what could possibly go wrong? Turns out, everything. What happened next was just this cascade of small, seemingly logical decisions that led to an absolutely unavoidable disaster. On the Andrea Doria, the captain saw the Stockholm on his radar and decided, okay, we'll pass on the right, starboard to starboard. So he orders a small turn to his left, to port, just to give them more room. Simple enough. But over on the Stockholm, the third officer misreads his radar. He thinks the Doria is farther away than she really is. And so he makes the exact opposite decision. He turns right to starboard to pass on the left. In that moment, they had just turned directly into each other's paths. Can you just imagine the sheer horror of that realization? In the final seconds, they finally see each other's lights cutting through the fog. The Andrea Doria's captain makes a desperate hard left turn, engines full power, trying to outrun the collision. The Stockholm orders a full reverse. But it was far too late. And this is it, the moment of impact. That reinforced bow of the Stockholm, remember, the one built to smash through solid ice? It acts like a battering ram. And it strikes the Andrea Doria right in her side, just behind the bridge, one of the most vulnerable parts of the entire ship. The force is it's unimaginable. For several seconds, the Stockholm plows deeper and deeper into the Doria, tearing a massive, gaping hole almost 40 feet deep. It punctured multiple watertight compartments, way below the waterline. And as the two ships wrench apart, the cold Atlantic Sea just begins to pour into the Andrea Doria. She's mortally wounded. 46 people on board were killed almost instantly, and 5 crewmen on the Stockholm also lost their lives in that collision. You know, there's a fundamental rule at sea called the rules of the road, and it's simple. When two ships are approaching head-on, both are supposed to turn to their right, to starboard, so they pass each other safely on their left, or port side. It's the same as driving a car, but the Doria turned left and the Stockholm turned right. It was a fatal, direct violation of the most basic protocol, all driven by a misread radar and a wrong assumption. The collision itself was over in just a few seconds. But for the hundreds of people trapped on the crippled Andrea Doria, the fight for their lives was just beginning. And what happened next was nothing short of extraordinary. So the damage to the Doria was catastrophic. Water gushed into her starboard fuel tanks, and she immediately began to list severely. Within minutes, that list was so bad that all the lifeboats on her high port side were completely useless. You just couldn't launch them. Meanwhile, the Stockholm, even with its bow completely crushed, was actually stable and staying afloat.
And amid all of this chaos, one of the most incredible survival stories in maritime history unfolds. A 14-year-old girl named Linda Morgan was asleep in her cabin on the Andrea Doria. The impact literally threw her from her bed, across the dark gap between the ships, and onto the crumpled, wrecked bow of the Stockholm. When a Swedish crewman found her and tried to explain where she was, she just replied, in Spanish, "Impossible, I am a passenger on the Andrea Doria." She became known forever as the Miracle Girl. Now, despite the Doria's severe list, despite half her lifeboats being gone, a massive rescue operation got underway. The Stockholm, the French liner Ile-de-France, and a bunch of other ships raced to the scene. And there, in the dark and the fog, they ferried survivors from the dying liner. In the end, this number, 1,660 passengers and crew, were saved. It is still considered the greatest peacetime sea rescue in history. Just amazing. The Andrea Doria slipped beneath the waves about 11 hours after she was hit. But the story was far from over. In the wake of the collision, the search for answers was just beginning. So a formal inquiry started, but it didn't last long. The two shipping lines decided to settle out of court, so no official blame was ever assigned. But maritime experts and a later very thorough analysis by the U.S. Merchant Marine Academy, they all came to a pretty clear conclusion. Both vessels were at fault. Here's the real irony. The disaster wasn't caused by a failure of technology. In fact, it's often called the first radar-assisted collision. It was a failure of human judgment. Both ships were going way too fast for the foggy conditions. Both bridge crews completely misinterpreted the data they were seeing on the radar screens. They both made deadly assumptions about what the other ship was going to do. And crucially, they never just picked up the radio to talk to each other. And this, right here, is why this story still matters so much today. The sinking of the Andrea Doria was a tragic but powerful wake-up call. It led directly to major changes in maritime law, stricter rules for operating in fog, much better mandatory training for using radar, and a requirement for ships to establish radio contact when they're getting close to each other. These are lessons written in steel, and they have saved countless lives since. So we end with a question that really echoes far beyond that one foggy night in 1956. The crews of these two ships had a tool that gave them the incredible power to see through the fog. But it didn't prevent the collision. In a way, it actually contributed to it by creating this false sense of security. And it really makes you wonder, doesn't it, about all the technologies that we rely on today. Do they truly make us safer, or do they just make us more confident as we steam ahead toward our own unforeseen disasters?